tell, as a commissioner of police, tell a politician, back off. You have no knowledge of the law. You have no knowledge of law enforcement. You cannot force my officers to do the wrong thing.
But that is somebody's son. That is somebody's child. That is part of a family. And I think that is the part that they are missing out.
Because E and F are apt to be used oppressively.
It's like because we don't see disabled people as sexual beings, which is ridiculous.
You mean they don't want to listen to your version of science? They have
their
own science. You have your science.
What we need to do is teach people to think and not what to think.
Today, it's too bad that everybody do what they want.
If I could forgive Bernard Ford, then I could forgive Bob Morris too. And today, on this day, I no more have anything in my heart for what he did.
The education system has to be very fluid and dynamic because we're living in very different and changing times.
Treating all your citizens equally, all your citizens fairly, recognizing each group, not discriminating against one or the other.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me here for much more than diplomatic passports. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bubb Report. We go there.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special primetime edition of the Bubb Report. I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb. We're happy that you can join us for this program. And of course, this program will be focusing on the commemoration and celebration of Emancipation Day in Grenada in 2025. Now, on August 1st this year, Grenada, for the first time in its history, will commemorate and celebrate the 1st of August as the official Emancipation Day holiday. Now, in years past, Emancipation was marked on the first Monday in August, but the date was shifted by the government of Grenada in keeping with the day that the British colonizers officially declared our ancestors free and human on August 1st, 1838. Of course, on August 1st, 1834, the Slavery Abolition Act came into effect, marking the official end of chattel slavery in the British Empire. Now, this act emancipated more than 800,000 enslaved Africans in the Caribbean, Canada, and South Africa, respectively. However, the journey towards freedom was a gradual one initially, through a system called the apprenticeship system, which required former enslaved Africans to continue working for their captors for a few years. Then indentureship welcomed workers from Europe, India, China, and the Middle East to work in near slavery conditions for a time. Now, complete freedom was eventually granted on the 1st of August, 1838. But while our enslaved African ancestors became free, their barbaric and oppressive enslavers were compensated for the loss of, quote, their property. The British government paid out £20 million to compensate some 3,000 enslaver families that owned our ancestors for the loss of what they called their property when slave ownership was abolished in Britain's colonies in 1833. Now, this figure represented a staggering 40% of the Treasury's, that's the British Treasury's annual spending budget. And in today's terms, calculated as wage values, equates to about £16.5 billion. Of course, while these slave-owning captors, human traffickers, human smugglers were compensated for, quote, their property, our enslaved ancestors received no recompense for the forced labor that they had to endure for hundreds of years. Of course, emancipation is marked by diverse celebrations across the Caribbean. Of course, each island has its unique way of honoring this historic day, reflecting local traditions and cultural expressions. In Jamaica, for example, Emancipation Day is celebrated with cultural performances, music, and reenactments of historic events. The day often includes readings of the Emancipation Proclamation and the laying of wreaths at significant monuments. Over in Barbados, they observe the day with the Emancipation Walk, a symbolic journey that retraces the steps of ancestors who fought for freedom. The island also hosts educational events, lectures, and cultural showcases. Our neighbors in the south, the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, they observe that day with Canboulay reenactments, which are dramatic presentations that depicts the early morning raids on enslaved Africans who gathered to practice their cultural traditions and religious practices. These celebrations highlight the island's African heritage and the resilience of its African peoples. Of course, over in Grenada, the intention is to celebrate emancipation and commemorate that day on the eve of emancipation with a watch night event, as well as on the day itself with a series of cultural events in Grenada. So here to make sense of this milestone holiday in Grenada, and I say milestone because this is the first time that Grenada will be celebrating and commemorating emancipation on the day, the actual anniversary of the proclamation, which is August 1st. I'm joined by Livingston Nelson, who is the chairperson. He is the chairman of the Emancipation Committee in Grenada, as well as by Dr. John Angus Martin, who is a member of the Emancipation Committee. Gentlemen, welcome to the Bubb Report.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, absolutely. Dare I say happy emancipation? Yes, so Livingston, I want to begin with you. Of course, the government legislated August 1st as this holiday now. So let us put this in broader context, the significance of celebrating emancipation as on August 1st as opposed to the first Monday in August.
Yes, so again, good morning, good day to all the listeners on the Bubb Report. And of course to my colleague here, Dr. Angus Martin. Now, let me say, Kellen, the government has decided that this year for the first time to celebrate August the 1st as our Emancipation Day. Now, previously it was done on the first Monday, and we also had the first Monday and the Tuesday as holiday. I think Dr. Angus probably will give more detail as to why it was celebrated then. But there has been some calls from several different quarters, including the Grenada Cultural Foundation, Reparations Committee, on other citizens, for us to recognize Emancipation Day, August the 1st, and to be in line with all the other islands within the region. So the government has then put this committee into place, which I am now chairing, to, in a sense, echo the intention that this time we are making a serious effort to recognize the travesty, the cruelty, the journey to freedom that took place with emancipation. So here we are now on the threshold of August the 1st, launching a program as much as possible to try to recapture, but to try to bring people together, to try to lift the awareness of the Grenadian population as it relates to the seriousness of what emancipation means to us. So we have twofold activity, twofold objective. One is to bring people together, baby tree, bring people together. Secondly, to ensure that we try to express as much as possible the tenets that represent our identity, our culture. And thirdly, to inject as much as possible cultural facts, cultural relics, information that would let our people know, to get them much more conscious, more aware, as it relates to what it is to be an independent and free people. So we are trying to satisfy as much as we can those three agenda items, in our first chance of celebrating Emancipation August the 1st.
Let me bring in Dr. Martin. Now, Dr. Martin, can you contextualize for us? Just give me 1 second. Let me pause this here. 1 second. History here. Give us some history here with respect to that first Monday in August, and that historic celebration, and why throughout history, following the Emancipation Proclamation, was that first Monday celebrated as a holiday or observed as a holiday and not August 1st?
Right. Most of these holidays, any historical during the colonial period, they were celebrated as bank holidays. Even, Carnival or anything like that, they were bank holidays. The bank was the major institution of business, I guess, and they were closed. And so around those would be described as blank. So that's how it was in the legislation until it was changed recently. So which meant that they would be celebrated on a Monday, and I guess it's part of making these longer weekends, which meant that they could stage other activities. In the case of Grenada, we had lots of horse racing that would take place over these long weekends. So people would come from different parts of the island and get together for these celebrations. So emancipation was not emphasized. There were years when we would celebrate emancipation, but those would not take precedence over the other activities.
Why was emancipation not emphasized? I suspect during the colonial period, because I understand that was punctuated by horse racing. I guess horse racing was the mainstay of the aristocrats, the British aristocrats who were still there. Was that an attempt to whitewash the history of emancipation?
Right. I think there was just not a group of people, basically, that promoted emancipation. We saw in 1933, we actually had a celebration, but it was not about emancipation. It was about Wilberforce. It was a celebration of Wilberforce and his support for emancipation. So there was actually a century celebrating the centenary of Wilberforce's accomplishment. And we even have down at the bottom cemetery, if you go to pillars to the summer house area, you would actually still see on the pillars Wilberforce Cemetery. That was the dedication for the 100 years of the passage of the Emancipation Act, but it was not really the celebration of emancipation. And that would develop later on.
For the benefit of the layman who may not know who Wilberforce is, please educate us on who Wilberforce was. Yes.
William Wilberforce was a member of parliament in the British legislature, who was one of the most prominent people to fight for emancipation. And it was his efforts that really caused him and several others, like Clarkson and stuff, that really pushed the British Parliament to pass the Emancipation Act. So that was on the legislative front. He played a large role in that. And there's a lot of debate, of course, over his role and others, and what role did the legislative act itself, what caused it to happen? What were some of the other activities that were going on in the colonies itself and by others who were advocating as well for emancipation?
So what I hear you saying here is that our enslaved brothers and sisters were not necessarily given that prominence and that agency, I suppose, or that even that recognition that, you know, that we, our ancestors were enslaved for as long as they were.
Right. I think it's a little later on we see individuals like William Galway Donovan and stuff that they begin to advocate for the celebration of emancipation. And Dr. Cox, who is a deceased Grenadian historian at Rice University, I believe, he actually did quite a bit looking at the celebration of the first emancipation, the centenary of it, and later emancipation holidays, and how it would become over the years an activity that actually commemorates emancipation and not just the people who had passed the legislation. But that would take a few years. And I think we never celebrated it on a yearly basis. So probably the big anniversaries is when it would become something to celebrate, the 50th anniversary, the 100th, that kind of thing, 150. Those were mostly when it was really celebrated, but not as an annual event. We actually don't see the annual event coming in until the 1980s and 1990s. And that is where Grenville, as part of the Rainbow City activities, that it really takes on that annual celebration and commemoration.
Yeah, and I want to bring, because I think context is everything here. Livingston, I want to bring you in here to talk about the role that St. Andrew Big Parish played in really giving space for emancipation to be seen as a prominent mainstay on the cultural calendar of Grenada.
So yes, Kellan. So the Rainbow City Festival was a very bustling activity. And they utilized the Monday and the Tuesday to celebrate Rainbow City Festival. But then after a while, there arose a group of persons, people like Glenwell and others, that wanted to recognize emancipation within the celebration. So, of course, we didn't have the 1st of August, but we had the first Monday and the Tuesday. So then the Monday was then designated as that special day within the Rainbow City Festival, where we would celebrate emancipation. So I think the first one started by having a walk. It started with a walk from Tivoli to Grenville, and it was called the Emancipation Walk. Since then, you had other persons like from within the Institute for People's Enlightenment that also played a major role in trying to ensure that emancipation had some stay, and Grenville was the place that was chosen, or that was being, at that time, to celebrate emancipation. So yes, that happened. So when the question now arises as to where we should then recognize or celebrate emancipation, it became just a natural answer that Grenville became that venue to continue that what they used to do. For the last 10 years also, the Grenada Cultural Foundation had a small activity that took place in the town of St. George. But it was no comparison to what, the level of organization, the level of interest that was shown in Grenville. So that is why this year we are going back to Grenville, and we are doing it in a much bigger way. Mind you, that going back to Grenville means that at some way it might affect the original Rainbow City Festival. And of course, the fact that it is going to affect what we know as Rainbow City Festival, we are putting something much bigger, and probably much more rewarding, it's now national to ensure that Emancipation celebration get its serious prominence.
Well, yes. Go ahead. Yes.
But just one other thing, I
yes.
think it's just really recognizing the fact that the government this year has, come forward and has expressed the intention to make it a national event in a very, very big way. So I think that too is very commendable, that they twin with Rainbow City to ensure that it happens.
Mm-hmm. Now, you actually preempted my next question, and that has to do with not only Rainbow City Festival, which you just articulated here, but Carriacou Regatta. Now, Carriacou Regatta is also cultural. It has been a cultural mainstay in that that August Monday, August Tuesday holiday.
Yes.
Now, did the Cultural Foundation, members of the Emancipation Committee, the government of Grenada, give thought to, maybe representatives from Carriacou, give thought to how that will affect Carriacou Regatta?
Yeah, I think that was done not from the that was done not from the Cultural Foundation point of view, but I know there was some level of consultation as it relates to how that would affect the regatta in Carriacou. And so I think when they weigh the balance, the effect of the regatta, the effect of Rainbow City Festival, I think the government thought that it was a bigger project, a more worthwhile project to go ahead with the celebration on the 1st. Whether adjustment or how the adjustments would be made as it relates to regatta and Rainbow City Festival, that has to be seen in the future, because it's the first year. So the first year it shake up what was actually being established before, meaning the regatta in Carriacou and the Rainbow City Festival. But I think the big win then would come for the fact that the nation can now look forward to galvanize their support behind the celebration of this activity. And hopefully what happened in Carriacou, the regatta, can then adjust to still have the regatta, because I think it is as important as possible to have the regatta. I cannot make a recommendation of how it would be. I mean, we have two carnivals, one in Carriacou and one in Grenada. I don't know if something like that would happen. I really don't know. I don't want to preempt anything. But I'm just saying that Carriacou usually find a way of adjusting and doing what they need to do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And culturally in Carriacou, of course, Carriacou has very, very strong ties to the motherland. With respect to the big drum dancing, of course, the late great Winston Fleury, that there were several pilgrimages of people from West Africa who were, the cousins of the Carriacou who were able to directly trace their roots to Carriacou and vice versa. Are they going to be having activities there in Carriacou as well? Given how strongly connected they are, how strongly rooted they are to the motherland? Or maybe is that something that might be done next year?
I mean, you're asking if we plan a separate activity in Carriacou on the 1st of August?
On the same day, correct? Yes.
On the same day, no, that was not taken into consideration this year. I don't know going forward if that can be done in the following years. But as of now, you must bear in mind that it's the first year, so we are at this stage. We have engaged some people in Carriacou, but the main intention was for them to come to mainland Grenada and to be part of the celebration. Going forward, I don't know. I think it is something that we have to consider. I don't know if, again, the Carriacou might want to shift into having their own semblance of celebration with support from mainland or from the Emancipation Committee, or if the regatta would shift there. But I think that is a conversation that is best had going forward. As we look forward towards emancipation.
That would be my piece of feedback that I would give if I have anything to do with it. Given I'm not sure if Dr. Martin has any ideas on that, but
well, I would say I think in the past I know I have assisted in providing educational material for the folks in Carriacou to add as part of the regatta celebrations. I think I could envision that in the future, we could have emancipation celebrations shifted from parish to parish. And that emphasizes the role of each parish in Grenada's achievement of their independence, of their, the freedom. So I could see it going to Carriacou one year, where we engage with the big drum dance, because that is a celebration of ancestors. I've always advocated that the big drum dance should be an essential part of emancipation, because it allows for that expression, that connection. So I can easily see that this celebration can shift parish-wise to different parishes and use that as a celebration of each parish, and their cultural expression across Grenada. So in the future, sure. And I think we had expressed that. I think I've heard the Prime Minister express that in terms of looking at October 19th, and having different parishes play a role as opposed to centralizing everything, that we could see this moving around the island to help different parts of the island become instrumental in this celebration.
Now, before we get into a conversation about the activities that will mark that would mark August 1st this year, one of the anxieties that I have, one of the concerns that I have as an educator, is that given how much we are so inundated in this digital space, digital life is ubiquitous now. You cannot escape it. You have your AI, you have your TikToks, you have your social media, you have all of that. What are we doing, or what thoughts do you gentlemen have in perhaps bringing the history alive in more intentional and realistic ways that will capture the imagination of young people who, quite frankly, see history as this very, very distant thing, which really it's not, right? That sees history sometimes as this abstract thing in terms of dates and names of historic figures, but that's about it. And the sad reality is that if you were to do a survey among the average Grenadian young person under the age of, I would say even under the age of 45, let's put it there, because even people at my age don't even know their history that well. What thoughts and I will start with you, Livingston, from the cultural foundation end of things. How are we going to ensure that history, that very rich and dark history of our ancestry in the Caribbean will be imparted from generation to generation, such that you're going to have more Livingston Nelsons when you're gone. You're going to have more Angus Martins in the future.
Angus, and I would like Angus, I would continue, but I would like Angus to start in terms of what we're doing with the educational aspect. So I think Angus can start.
Yes, so Dr. Martin, he's giving way to you for that.
Right. I would say I totally get your perspective and totally understand. I teach a history class at TAMCC, and I encounter the same thing, and I think in the defense of the students, they always say, but nobody taught us any of this. So I think there's a larger issue here that we need to get more conscious of the curriculum to begin with, and the role history needs to play in that curriculum. We need to make sure that history becomes mandatory. And of course, we do need to upgrade the way we teach history. We cannot teach history the way we taught it 50 years ago. We have too much new technology, which is where most of our children are. So we do have to really work with them to update, basically, History 2.0 in how we impart that information. We have to come up with innovative ways. And one of the things that we're doing for Emancipation Day is that we've come up with a set of Did You Know, looking at different aspects of the history of slavery and how freedom came about in Grenada, and having young people basically make little videos and things and put that out there and share those with young people and on the internet, on IG and other places, so that people can interact with the data in a different way than we normally would, that somebody just come in and given a lecture or whatever. So I think it's really providing information in a different way, in a way that that interacts with people and where people are today, i.e. on the phone. We're also going to have a tent set up at the events in Grenville that specifically address the history of emancipation and looking at some other issues. We're actually going to share even biographical information on some of the enslaved people who gained their freedom, so people come away with a sense of not just the idea of this amorphous slavery happened and it ended, but some of the individuals, and so that people learn about individuals and how it may have impacted people on a whole, and not just this big thing about slavery.
Yeah, and I also think mapping the history is also crucial because, for example, there are many places you walk in Grenada, and many people may not know, for example, that the market square was an auction block. That's where our ancestors were sold, right? You know, many of the towns in Grenada was where a lot of the ships landed, right? On Melville Street, for example, I wonder how many people know that. I believe in the police barracks that a lot of our ancestors were kept there. Is that correct, Dr. Martin?
No, it's not. I would like to dispel. I would like to dispel
that
a few
myth,
things.
please.
Yes. Actually, and I do understand. I think a lot of our history sometimes it's influenced from America. And it's influenced from the fact that there's a lot of information coming out of America because we watch movies and things like that about slavery, because we do not do the best job of talking about what happened in Grenada. So we end up taking in information from other places because it's more readily accessible. For instance, the comment about slaves being on the block in the market square, we do not have evidence of that. Actually, a lot of the sales took place on the Carriacou, where the ships came in. We actually have records of 550 slave ships coming into the Carriacou, and that is where we had on the Carriacou, you had these businesses, these slave factors that had slave yards, where they would buy once the ships. A lot of the sales took place on the ships themselves, but once the ships decided enough, they sold enough, they would sell the remainder to factors. And these factors on the Carriacou and some other places in the town would keep the enslaved people where people would come in and purchase them. So I think really the Carriacou should be the focus in terms of looking at a place where this would have been the first place that the enslaved people would see Grenada. We actually have a record of we have one really detailed record of a ship that left the UK, went to West Africa, loaded up with enslaved people. There was an attempted revolt on it. That ship ended up in Grenada. It's called the Hudibras. And we actually have some details of the process of how enslaved people were prepared for sale on that ship. And how, the whole process is very detailed. It's one of the few that we have. How the enslaved people, the captives were cleaned up, oiled down, that whole process, and presented. And the ones that they wanted to fetch a higher price for, they would actually leave them under the ship, leave hidden for a while, so that you sell out the ones that were not deemed the best ones. And when the ship, when the big set buyers would come in, the plantations who would probably advocate for getting the choices, then you would bring out the prime and captives and sell them for higher prices. And at the end of that, if they didn't sell out in time and the ship wanted to move on, they would actually sell them to local factors on the Carriacou, where you would have these slave yards, where buyers would come in later on to purchase these enslaved people over time.
So in the context of that history, can you place, and of course this is not a history class, but I think it's important that we debunk, and this was an education for me as well, because I was always under the impression that the Market Square and Melville Street were two of those places, but thank you for debunking that. So what role did the Market Square play, if at all? Because they're reporting that there is reporting, for example, that a lot of the folks from the Federal Rebellion that they were executed in the Market Square.
Yes. That's the market square held several purposes at that time. It was the market, of course. It's where the troops trained, the militia as well. But also there was a cage, what was referred to as a cage. So any enslaved people that ran away, they were brought into these cages, into the cage, and basically said there would be an advertisement in the newspaper that said so-and-so was picked up, and if you do not collect him, they will be sold. But that's where Maroons and so on were brought in by different people who captured them in different parts of the island. But it also served as a place where there was a gibbet, execution by hanging was staged in the market square, and all of the Feron people, I think at least 39 of them we have evidence for, were taken from the jail, which was actually on Young Street in what is today called the drill yard. That's where the prison was. They were brought from there and taken to the market square where they were executed. So the market square served all of those purposes, but generally the sale of enslaved people, of captives that were just brought in, or other enslaved people, were done at auction houses, not in the market square per se. And we have lots of these advertisements from the newspapers of that period telling us that they would be sold at different places and things like that.
Yeah, and I think that the bigger point I was making is that I think there is also space for experiential learning around, bringing that history alive outside of because everyone knows the plantations, yes.
Right.
I think they know the prominent ones without knowing that there were plantations all over, right? The island. But bringing that history alive in a way that makes the young people more interested in it. Experiential learning is one of those things, I think. And I would be willing to offer my services there voluntarily. So once I have the time to do that,
No, I think one of the things we should do is create a slave route across Grenada to highlight different aspects of slavery across the entire island. Look at different aspects in different parishes and different places. I think people don't realize there were hundreds and hundreds of enslaved people in the towns because they were part of businesses. There were ferry businesses taking people all over the island. Those were run by enslaved people, something as that. There were businesses, shops, fishing, people that did fishing for a living, and lots of enslaved people did that. There were lots of ported business. All of the ships that came to deliver produce and things in Grenada, there were little boats that took them, lighters, that eventually we know them as lighters, that would take the produce from the shore, from warehouses, and put into these little lighters and taken out to the ships, anchored somewhere in the stream, as they used to call it. So there were lots of different jobs, domestic, the clergy in the churches, they had enslaved people. The hospital was run by enslaved people. So like you say, we actually only learn about sugar plantations. We don't even learn of the fact that there were all these other plantations, coffee plantations, cocoa plantations, provision. People were just producing provisions to sell, and there were these different, so each of them had different dynamics, but we generally only hear about sugar plantations.
The sugar economy, yes.
Carriacou, it was cotton, very different dynamic again. They produced a lot of corn in Carriacou. That was their food crop. So I think we there is a lot out there that we need to learn. And I think your suggestion of an experiential, people need to know of the places where these things happen. We have images. We have somebody that drew have a drawing from the late 1700s of enslaved people being beaten in the market square, and it's called a four poster, where your hands and feet would be held down and your clothes taken off, and you would be beaten on the ground, and somebody witnessed it from a hotel over the market, so so the market has a lot of history. The town itself carried a lot of history. I think sometimes we end up, because of a rumor or some folk lore, we might pick a certain place that may not actually fit the history itself once we take a look at it. And Melville Street fits that, because it's a dungeony looking place, even though its use was basically for storing things like wine and so on, that individual place was based on a story that was heard, and we we have memorialized it, but in truth, that place does not hold that significance that we have given it.
Because again, I will have that conversation offline. But Livingston, I want to bring you back here because, again, slavery is not Black history, in my view. Slavery is interrupted Black history, African history, yes? And
Yes.
so when we are thinking about how we reimagine educating successive generations about our history, how do we incorporate our ancestral African history in that? And I'm bringing that up because I remember when I visited Ghana, there were so many cultural expressions. For example, the sucking of the teeth when you stoops, right? Your grandmother had a way when she pointed out somebody, she used her mouth.
Yeah.
Right? All of those things I was able to see in Ghana, the mannerisms, how, the food, right? The hibiscus drink, for example, that we call sorrel, that's such a mainstay over there, right? And so many other nuances, little things that I think, outside of the obvious ones, of course, the dance and the drumming and, other musical expressions, even our spiritual expressions that the colonizers attempted to demonize, whether it's the Orisha, the Shango, the Voodoo, whatever it is, right? How then do we incorporate those aspects of it to impress upon our young people that, yes, we were enslaved, but that is just the interruption of our legacies and our identities and our histories?
Well, two things you said that that is very interesting. The first one, I would like to link what I would consider to be the history lesson that Angus just gave, in some of the cruelty that took place, in some of the way that we were treated as items, as merchandise. So that is important. Our history did not study, Dr. Bubb, but when Angus mentioned that, we now reach to a point now that we are emancipated. What is it we're hoping to achieve? Where are we going? So then I now tie in what you just said, the nuances, the similarities between what we have here and what you see in Ghana, what you see from the Nigerian movies, how similar we walk, our dance, our expression, how we eat, our food. And I believe if we have to be free, we must go back in terms of trying to capture those elements that best describe us as an African people. So the celebration here in Grenada must be mindful of trying to ensure that we are able to recapture, to promote our sense of identity, our cultural tenets that are still existing. So yes, we're going to have display of the drums, some of our dances, those very things that make us Afrocentric. So the emancipation itself mean reclaiming part of our identity, to the many different expressions. So of course it is close to Carnival. So we have on the Thursday, which is on the 31st, we have what we call the Watch Night. So the Watch Night would be a celebration of what I call spiritual outpouring, interdenominational expressions. So yes, Christianity and the church played a major role in ensuring that slavery took place, that slavery went the distance it went. We were basically nullified. We were, through the preaching, through the teaching of the churches. But what we also are going to be doing on the Watch Night is to recognize the outpouring or the spiritual outpouring of the Rastafarians, of Ifa, of the spiritual Baptists, of what some people quote unquote call the Shango Baptists. So we have those expressions still coming in the fore to show that not everything is lost. So those nuances you saw in Ghana is still written into our DNA, and that is what we're going to be celebrating. On the day, of course, on Friday, we are going to be celebrating our local food, which would start at 6 a.m. in the Grenville Grenville car park. And then we are going to have remnants of some of, I don't like the word remnants though, and I don't even like the word residue, but we are going to have tenets of what constitute aspect of our culture that we've been able to forge in this part of the world. So we're going to be celebrating the Shatney. We're still going to be celebrating them. We're going to be celebrating the Feco. We're going to be celebrating the drums and
maybe the wild Indian. Although in and of itself, that's a whole other
that one would not be part of this year.
That's a whole other conversation.
But we have something similar. We call the Apache. That which is something that has been forged here from us. I think it was forged as a sense of solidarity with the native people. That is the Apache. So we're going to celebrate that as something that we have been able to copy, something that we have adopted. So with all that, and going on the line with what Dr. Angus was mentioning in terms of the educational aspect, for us in the Grenada Cultural Foundation in particular, it cannot be just an educational forum that we put on just for emancipation. It has to be a continuous one, lifting the game. Is that, what we need is a groundswell. What we're hoping for is that people would at least, even if it is just a show, but to wear your African wear on that day, to show your your resemblance, your identity with something that was lost. So we're asking you to come out with your African wear, to be part of the parade, the flambeau parade, to be part of the reenactment through dramatization that we're going to be putting on that day. So the program is geared to see if we could recapture that, those aspects of our culture, to reinforce our identity, and also to show that we need to have everybody coming on board. It's a continuous educational aspect that we need to be showcasing, and promoting year-round.
To stick a pin on the educational aspect there, and I know I'm belaboring this point, but how are institutions in Grenada, I'm talking about the secondary schools now. Of course, Dr. Martin is at the T.A. Marshall Community College. I know schools are on holidays. So how are they going to be involved? Are the history classes, the social studies classes going to be involved in the Emancipation Day activities outside of the cultural groups in the communities who are usually part of it?
Well, I mean, I think we have a slight dilemma in Grenada where on the day where we're hosting Emancipation is the same day that school is on holiday. But what we have done is to incorporate some aspect of the school for this year, mainly through the drum corps, to ask them to be part of it and ask them to at least dress in African wear, or to have some of the original costume that they were wearing. Again, it's a gradual process of trying to get people acclimatized to the new trust that the government has indicated in terms of centralizing emancipation as a very important day. But while we want to do social studies, and while we want to teach history, there also have to be the need to have more resources, more work being done, more research, because I think that is something is lacking here. We might want to put on a special program to reach our children, but we need more research material, more documentaries, something that we are basically focusing on here at the Grenada Cultural Foundation. We also have, as part of to reach some of the children, at what we call a tic-tac challenge, where we are asking them to portray or to replicate some aspect of our culture. So they do a research part of it, and ensuring that as they research, they can produce some aspect of our culture again. And that is, we try to coin the social media and try to get our young people to be interested in researching our history likewise.
Angus?
I guess I would like, taking off from where Livingston talk about research and resources. I think we do need to look at where people go to find research in libraries and museums and things like that. The fact that we still do not have a central library. I think there are school libraries, but again, they probably don't have specific information on Grenada and history and things like that. I think we are making some progress with Dr. Philip Nichols' Philip book that was just made mandatory in Forms 1 and Form 2 in secondary school, but that needs to be extended across the board, into primary schools especially. And we have to have a deeper emphasis, not just one on what the colors mean and things like that. It really has to get deeper, the elements of our culture, where it's come from and how it's affected us. So I think all of those things should be things that we begin to think seriously about as we move forward. That we cannot just continue with the surface history, that we have to dig deeper, and we have to find new ways of reaching young people, especially, and reorganizing the way we teach and engage on history.
And part of that surface history is, and I cringe every time I hear it, and maybe it's because, again, I'm so grateful for Mr. Ali Gill, who was my history teacher at the Presentation College, who said, no, Christopher Columbus did not discover anywhere. How could you discover a place where people lived? And Grenadians still parrot this nonsense that how could you discover a place where people lived? But I suppose the Europeans did not see indigenous people as people anyways, in the way that they did not see us as people. And we also have to acknowledge that the doctrine of discovery was a Catholic invention.
Right.
By one of their evil popes. No disrespect to anybody who's Catholic here, no offense. But of course, at that time, they were evil. I'm sorry, they were part of the intellectual pioneers of this idea of chattel slavery in many respects. Right, Dr. Martin?
So I think in bringing that up, it shows that there are many gaps in our history.
Yes.
There are many errors in our history. There are many things that we need to, as Livingston pointed out, we need to create the resource. The where is this information going to be? Like if we want our students to go do research, where are they going to find it? Going on the internet, you're going to find just the repetition of these errors.
Yes.
In multiple levels of it. So we do need to create that basis. Like I said, I have been fortunate as a history student to have been able to travel to archives and lived in Africa and things like that. So I have like I said, it's been fortunate my life in history because of the access I've had to archives and museums and libraries, and specifically learning about Grenada's landscape, the cultural landscape. But we need to make that available to every Grenadian, not just the few who study history. Because I want students to challenge even the things that I say, but we're not there because they don't have access to the documents and other things that I have and the places I have been able to visit and things like that. So we have to really set the stage, teach history from using original documents, to be able to question Columbus, to be able to question the notion of savages,
and cannibals and
exactly.
Just, I mean,
but how can we
I get very upset about that.
We have interpretations of history available to our students and not the original documents that when you look at them, you realize, like one writer that looked at cannibalism and said, if the Indians, and he used, if the Caribs were on trial, they would basically have to be a mistrial, because the evidence is not there. It's a lot of hearsay. But if you do not see that evidence, how can you evaluate it? So I do think that we need, and hopefully this Emancipation Day, the recognition of it on the actual day, is a way of us beginning that process of taking it over and saying, we need to take over how we teach history, how we teach the past, and where does that past begin? How far back do we go? To really say that these are all the things that affect us, but we need to go back beyond Columbus, beyond Africa, that kind of thing, to really get at the core of our identity.
And it's also about decolonizing the entire curriculum, which is why I'm so happy. And that's not only in Grenada, but I think that should be done throughout the Caribbean. I'm not too sure if there are conversations throughout the Caribbean about decolonizing the entire curriculum for CXC.
Right.
Where again, I don't want to hear another person tell me Christopher Columbus discovered anything. He did not even set foot in Grenada. You know, there is also this narrative that, oh, well, you know, if Christopher Columbus come back today and he see Guave and Victoria, is going to be the same. The man never set foot here, in the same way he never set foot in the United States, but they have a holiday for this man here.
There's even debate on if he actually saw Grenada and what he would have seen and who what he named and all of that. So there is a lot. There is a lot.
Yeah.
And I do think we need to, and I think we do need to approach history. And I think it's interesting. Just last night, I was having that conversation with someone that, like, people like yourself that could point to the fact that you had a teacher like Ali Gill. You know, you hear other students say that they had a teacher like Dr. Phillip. And they remember some of the history. But we only have few students that can say that. We need to have all Grenadian students that can say that, point to a teacher that really reached them in the way that history was related to them. And now they can actually go and go back into that and relate differently to the way that history is, as opposed to people repeating some of the things that we now take a lot of issue with.
Yeah, absolutely. A critical mass is needed, and perhaps Livingston with the Cultural Foundation as well, around this idea of the creative economy now and people creating content and all of that. And I think there is so much opportunity now and potential for people to be able to tell, to bring that history alive in vivid ways using the technologies of the creatives that we have now. You know, there is this Instagram page that I follow, Know Your Caribbean. I'm not too sure if you gentlemen are familiar with it. I'm not too sure to the extent to which they're really fact-checking and verifying a lot of the content that they post, but I do appreciate the effort that goes into the work that they're doing on that page in bringing that history alive. So that critical mass is important. But let us get to the actual watch night in terms of start time, where people would be assembling, and on the day itself, start time again, where people will be assembling and whatnot. Livingston.
So on the watch night, the activities start anyway from around 4:30 on the Thursday. Well, for matter of fact, there's a clarion call for everyone to dress in the African way on that day. So it's a working day. It's a work day. And what we did is to ask all, like the private companies, the public servants, to be given permission, though, that they can have they can wear African way on that day to the various workplaces. So that is the first thing we did for that Thursday. The second idea is that we are going to have some like a vendor's booth. So we're going to be having agro-processors display. We're going to have the arts and craft, and we are going to have an educational stand at the bus terminus in Grenville. Later from 7, we're going to start with having what I call spiritual outpouring, but it's an watch night interdenominational session where we're not looking for preaching or teaching. What we are looking for is for people to portray through songs, songs and praises, the chants, the drumming, the dances, etc., from the various church point of view. So we are having that on the night, and we are going to culminate that at 11. From 11, but what we refer to as a drum circle. So the drum circle would be led by the Tivoli drummers, Lion Pride and Ashanti Footprints. And we are asking all drummers, if you have a bell, a shell, a whistle, a tambourine, you have an next drum, we want you to come and join. If you can sing, if you can dance, to be part of that celebration. So you're going to be in with a drum circle. So that is what we are going to be doing on the Thursday. And as I said earlier on the Friday, it starts with having local meals and some very conscious music being served at the Grenville car park. From 2, the booths would be open at the Grenville bus terminus, so people can go there again and get the African wear. If you don't have any There are going to be drums from sale, beats. There are going to be, of course, food there. And there are going to be agro-processors displaying the craft and artisans. So that would be taking place from 2. At 4 o'clock, we would have the PAN. IMA, Rainbow City are going to be playing from 4 there in the park to about maybe 6. And from 4:30, we are hoping to start what we call the traditional parade, or the parade of bands coming into Grenville. So we start from Dunfermline. So there would be one at Dunfermline, there would be one at Saturday Junction, there would be one at Paradise. For those people that know the place by the traffic light, there would be a next one started from Progress Park, and there would be a next one started on Canal. So all these bands and them, about 5 of them would be starting at the same time. And then again, we followed through with a different route, starting from Dunfermline, and then, we put it in such a way, in such that there would be a constant parade from Dunfermline coming right down to Grenville, with the last band leaving thereabouts at 5:30. And that last band would go to Sobeys and meet with the parade. So the parade would start at 6:45, thereabout from Sobeys, with the Flambeau March, etc., as we get the dark, with the Flambeau March. And the Flambeau March would be joined with some of the traditional bands. They come into Grenville, make a complete run, enter into the bus terminus, and then we would have a short display of those bands at parade, maybe for half an hour, just quickly passing through. And then at 8 o'clock, we're going to be going stateside, start the official ceremony. And of course, as Angus said, there would be the books and things on display, educational forums taking place there. And yes, and stateside, and then you would have the other performances with live bands, people like Cotta Lane from Trinidad. We have Scholar, we have Wizard, we would have Edma Payne, we would have Tivoli Drummers, Lion Pride, Spiceland Dancers. I think I'm missing out a few, but we're going to have some of those. We're going to have one unit dancers performing on that main stage, and we are looking about 12:30 to end the entire program on that day. But so we expect everyone to come out in the full numbers to be part of that.
Absolutely. Dr. Martin, is there anything else you wish to add concerning the commemoration?
Yeah, I think I see this commemoration as a beginning in a way. It gives us that opportunity to start over in the way we look at this event. Hopefully, you had mentioned about Barbados and places with monuments and things like that. Yeah. I think we have very few monuments in Grenada in general. We tend not to celebrate. Like I said, if you go to any city in the Caribbean, you will see monuments to their heroes and whoever, but you see very little in Grenada. And I think we need to change that. We need to look at changing names of streets and things like that. So I think there are other ways that we can look at this emancipation as this a beginning of a new emancipatory process, where we look at the landscape itself and how it affects us, how it plays into how we celebrate and all of these different events, and look at ways and how we could change it to more reflect who we are.
We don't even have a Fedon Street. Do we even have we have nothing named after Fedon? How about we rechristen Melville Street as Fedon Street? That would be my first suggestion.
Well, I think this was stuff that was proposed earlier on. I think it's open. I think we just have to figure out the process. I think in moving.
I know something that the reparations committee also discussed.
The reparations committee has put forward some of that. So we definitely need to start pushing some of this as part of this whole process, I think.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for Livingston. Go ahead.
It's okay. Can you give me a minute? I think we shared a little. That is something which I've been doing at the beginning. Just want to recognize that it's not just the Grenada Cultural Foundation and Dr. Angus Martin. We have a whole other group of persons that have been playing major role. Example, we have the reparations committee mainly sitting on the panel with us is Ali Gill. We have the National Celebration Committee that is also with us. And I think based on the work that we are doing, I mean, CEDU is playing such an important role in basically taking the lead in so many ways in ensuring that the Emancipation celebration become a success for those partners. So I just want to say, for all the contributors thus far, we have an advertisement team, an advertising team, promotional team, and lots of other persons that are coming forward to ensure that Emancipation this year. As Dr. Angus said, this is our first year. We're making sure that we have a start, and it's a good start. But other years, there are going to be a lot more advocacy taking place. But there is one challenge we usually, Dr. Bob, how you mentioned about naming the streets, and Dr. Angus Martin mentioned about, the naming some of our heroes and some of the monuments. But I just want to say it's a personal challenge to everyone to start naming yourself and your children differently. The John and the Peter and the Anne and the Williams, some of those names, we could be more creative. So it's a personal challenge for you as you start recognizing your identity. Everybody else have their own sort of identity. So if I say to you, Wang Ching, you probably have an idea of the nationality of that person. And if I say Singh, you probably have an appreciation of that person. But I'm saying we have to start looking forward in naming ourselves and our children appropriately. And likewise, we continue with the streets and some of the heroes as we go forward. So this is just a personal challenge to all of us.
No. And I think that we can buck that personal challenge, for example, by having a course in school called Cultural Studies that incorporates modules of the carnival, that incorporates module of our African cultural history now, not so much the slavery history, but that cultural history. For example, impressing upon young people that in Ghana, for example, you are named according to the day of the week that you were born, right? Which is just such a fascinating thing that I didn't know. I only learned about that when I went to Ghana. When I told them my colonized name, they were like, no, that's actually not your name. You're Kofi because you were born on a Friday. Right? So those things, and maybe that's a challenge for the Cultural Foundation. We need to have a cultural studies course in schools that also that needs to take into account teaching about jab, teaching about the history of mass and pan, but also building practicum sessions around that, whether it's through wire bending for costumes and things like that, right?
Yes.
So maybe a cultural studies curriculum can take that into account. That's just my suggestion again. But
I agree.
Dr. Martin,
with you. I agree with you in that sense. But I actually think that that's how history should be taught.
Yes.
That you cannot separate culture from history because they are one and the same. Yes. I think we separated culture from history because we've separated the people. A lot of the people that make history, we've left them out. And that means we left out culture. So I think that we don't need a separate cultural studies, but all of that should be taught within
incorporated.
History.
Yes, and may I propose that we have whenever they have to make constitutional amendments, they call it constitutional conventions. I think we need to have an educational convention that looks at how we are let's call it a decolonized educational convention to decolonize all of those things and to reimagine how we are teaching and incorporating our culture, our history, so that when we're gone, at least, a young person telling a future visitor something that is actually accurate about who we are as a people.
Just want to share one little piece.
Yes, go ahead.
Speaking about that, do you know that on the mace of the House of Representatives, which is our symbol of parliamentary democracy, the symbol on it, which dates back to 1780, is actually enslaved people working on a sugar mill.
Oh, I was not aware of that.
Exactly. Not many people are aware of it, and we carry that around today. We've gotten rid of the white wigs, but we still have these symbols. And even though we celebrate the fact that we have this large mace, and it's old and whatever, but it belongs in the museum. We need to have things that represent us. The motto on it which is the original British motto. It says, "These shall be thine arts." Basically, it's from Virgil, instructing the Romans, but it's really the British took it upon themselves that it's their obligation to colonize peoples, including African peoples and others, and in creating the colony of Grenada. So they use that to celebrate, and we still celebrating it.
Oh yeah, I did not know that history. That makes me more upset now. Let's just become a republic, okay? Let's just become a republic, and let's stop the nonsense at this point. Gentlemen, thank you so much for appearing on the Bubb Report.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yes. Thank you so very much for having us. And always feel free, Kellen. We are ready and available.
Yes, absolutely. Our viewers and listeners, we just had a freewheeling and extensive conversation on the commemoration and celebration of Emancipation Day in Grenada, the very first time in Grenadian history that will be happening, Emancipation Day being celebrated on the 1st of August. And when I say first time, I mean recognizing the 1st of August as a public holiday for the purposes of commemorating and celebrating Emancipation Day. Of course, Mr. Livingston Nelson and Dr. Angus Martin was able to articulate what that day would look like, starting with a watch night on the night before. So we're happy that you can join us. We do hope to see many of you there. I will be there. As I am currently in Grenada at the moment. So definitely, I do look forward to seeing all of you there. And we encourage you to participate. This is our heritage. This is our history. This is our culture. And so I think it needs to be celebrated. And everyone needs to come. Bring your families so that we can all recognize the hard-fought struggles that our ancestors fought for in recognition of their freedom and in recognition of our freedom, because without their fights, we would not be free people today. So thank you again on behalf of the producers of the Bubb Report. I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb, and we will see you this coming Sunday for, of course, the regular installment of the program. Take care. Bye-bye.